Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the ProfNoctis Weekly Show. I'm Evan.
And I'm Wade. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about why we play the games we play, why I'm concerned about the Final Fantasy franchise, and we'll be continuing with part two of our character creator. With that, let's mosey. I have concerns.
About me?
We'll talk about those later, but no,
Okay.
not concerns about you. I've got concerns about the future of my favorite franchise, the Final Fantasy franchise.
How could
And
this be?
I know. Because I mean, for me, it's a 10 out of 10, an 11 out of 10 even.
Yeah.
Every game I play from that series is a banger, and it's been that way since 1992 when I played the very first Final Fantasy in my life, Final Fantasy 4/2 in America, because we were too dumb to get the ones in between there. But regardless, I am concerned because there are trends in gaming. And so what I'd like to do now is to go into a segment where we are talking about the psychology of gaming, why we play the games that we play. Now, I understand that not everybody listening to this or watching this is going to be a fan of Final Fantasy, but here's what I'd like to say to you, listener/viewer. My games may be today, but yours may be tomorrow. And so there's a reason for you to care. If you say and do nothing today, I will not be there to be able to speak for you tomorrow. So that's where we are, everybody. So the purpose of this segment is we want to examine motivations and understand them, and then to model conversations around these motivations, because ultimately we want to help our viewers, our audience, and ourselves. We want to learn how to have conversations about the things that we're passionate about, excited about, with people that we care about. This is something that I'll dive into in a little bit, but I have to do this every semester, talking to college freshmen and sophomores, sometimes a senior, but usually younger college students who are taking my Final Fantasy 15 class, and they always say, Dr. Langer, I don't like Final Fantasy. I don't know Final Fantasy. And I have to explain what is Final Fantasy and why that it's something that they should or could care about, even if it has no immediate bearing on their life. So that's kind of the goal of the segment.
Okay, so we're going to, based on your alarm about the future of your favorite franchise, we're going to try and understand why we like the things that we like a little bit more, and how to develop simple common language to be able to invite others into those passions without them having to play 300 hours of a game to really understand all the nuance of it. I love it. Okay, great. Tell me what it was that sparked this concern. It seems like you were scrolling Twitter again, which
which is, it never goes well when you just doom scroll, which is all I tend to do on Twitter.
You learn scroll.
/X.
You learn scroll.
So we learn scroll. That's true. I've found some good learn scroll accounts recently. But on May 23rd, Jacob Nevak, I think I'm pronouncing that right, he formerly reported to two CEOs of Square Enix for the better part of a decade.
The developer of Final Fantasy.
Thank you. He ran a subsidiary. He is into Square Enix Holdings, all kinds of stuff. So this guy knows what he's talking about. He knows. This is not just some throwaway opinion, because, if we're out there doing our own research, we understand that not every source is equally credible. This is a credible source. And so I'm reading through his, I think he's got like 20 or 30 tweets in this thread. Pretty immaculate. I mean, we're talking amazing stuff. He goes in trying to explain some of the alarm or some of the concern around some of the news statements that said that Final Fantasy 16 and Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth failed to meet sales expectations set by Square Enix. And so for me, knowing that Final Fantasy 16 and 7 Rebirth were both bangers, AAA titles. Rebirth is set to be one of the nominees for Game of the Year this year. It's concerning that games of this caliber are not meeting their sales expectations. And so the question for a lot of us is like, Is that from the CEO's side of things, the business thing? Are they overestimating what their profits should be? Or is there actually a systemic problem here with the gaming landscape? And he goes on to say that, yeah, there's a shifting landscape, and we should be expecting some changes in the future.
How does he describe it?
So he describes it as this almost competition and dichotomy of two different kinds of games, which you would have the traditional AAA one and done title. These are the games like Final Fantasy. It's games like The Last of Us, Uncharted. It's the games that you sit down and you play one time, a $70-ish experience that for 60 to 100 hours, you have one cohesive experience with an ending.
Now, games like Call of Duty and Battlefield and that kind of stuff, they're also AAA games. They just have a multiplayer component.
They have a multiplayer component that's going to extend their shelf life. And in fact, you see Call of Duty moving to this model of multiplayer called Warzone. It goes across multiple iterations of the franchise. So you have Black Ops 6 coming out later this year. Yep. It continues the Warzone multiplayer market.
A little bit of an aside, I saw that the install file for Black Ops 6 is supposedly 310
gigs.
Which, when the PlayStation comes with, 500 out the box, it's like...
And Evan, not only that. Did you read this? You have to be connected to the internet because some of the rendering of graphics is still being streamed beyond that 300 gigs. Yeah, I read that.
The future is here, and I don't know if I understand
I'm not sure if I like it or not, but if that is the streaming future, then we can look at less powerful systems like, say, the Switch.
For sure.
And they can stream up graphics. That's just a possibility.
As an aside, did you ever play any of the streaming betas? Like Google did one where you could play Assassin's Creed in just a browser window, and it just ran like a solid 60
That's how
FPS.
I do Game Pass. That's how I do some of Game Pass, actually.
Just stream it all?
So just stream it.
That's
how I did some of the Halos. Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, back to this. So
AAA versus...
An important aside. So it's this AAA versus things like, and I would include Call of Duty to a degree in this, but also games like Minecraft and Roblox and Fortnite. It's these ongoing games as service. And it
persistent revenue model.
Persistent revenue model. That's exactly right. And these games are just like gangbusters for the companies that make them.
Yeah.
And so the question is, why would you invest in some of these AAA one and done, $60 and done experiences when you could have these ongoing things that are making so much more money? I want to read a couple of tweets that that Jacob put out that I think are just really, really interesting. He says, total audience growth was a reasonable expectation in the 2015-2022 era, and it still is today. Not only had the industry grown significantly each year, but each day that new generation, the idea that new generations were coming of age, they were coming of age as gamers, meaning that your total addressable population should be increasing and you should be increasing your revenue. So what happened? Not just to Square Enix, but to the industry as a whole. Audience behavioral patterns are drastically different than expected in 2015. Remember, I said 2015 was pre-Fortnite. The way it used to work was you would pick a release date. You would pick a release date similar to a Hollywood movie, stick to it, and consider the competition to be the titles releasing the weeks before and after. We would look at Hitman and Deus Ex release and consider whether there was a Call of Duty or Assassin's Creed coming out at the same time, assuming that gamers had X amount of money to spend and Y amount of time. And that if we wanted to get the full sticker price, we would avoid those sort of weekends. So he goes on to say that at that time as a gamer, once you finished the most recent game you were on, you moved on to the next. Well, that all changed when people stopped moving to the next game. They stayed in Fortnite and just waited for the next season and paid for the next season or paid for the next drop or whatever it is. And because of that, the game industry, while still growing in revenue, is increasingly captured by fewer live service games that are generating a level of stickiness seen in social media companies. Okay, and so he kind of makes this comparison there. But the idea is, again, that presenting question: why would you chase after these single player one and done experiences when these are paying the bills?
Yeah, so your concern is that the market is shifting in a way that it's not going to be advantageous to develop the kind of games that you love anymore. And so you're worried that they're going to make fewer of them and eventually maybe even stop making them?
To be perfectly transparent, this is a very selfish concern.
As you're
I know I'm allowed to, but like for me personally, like the kind of games that I love, it makes me wonder about them. Now, we just came off of Summer Game Fest and the incredible Xbox Showcase. All of these, a lot of the games that were revealed in these two things really do excite me because they are the kind of games that I have. So maybe this fear is unfounded, but the revenue model, the income profitability of these games, it is concerning for me.
They are a business. They're not a charity, right?
Yeah.
And games help us do a lot of things. But when we're talking about this segment where we're talking about the psychology of why we choose the games that we do, that directly goes to market. And our goal is to try and understand why we play the games that we do, why we like what we like, and then help us to understand that in a way that we can then discuss it. So I think it's very fitting. And I think you're right to be concerned at market trends with big AAA games because they're also going up in price. I mean, you're talking $60, $70, $80, $90 for these games. The budgets are massive. So when you come at something with such a big budget, the revenue that you have to earn to recoup those costs is just massive. And these smaller games spend a lot more money on marketing, right? Because they don't have the same time spent in development. They don't have the same expenses and teams that have to work on them necessarily. And so they scale a little differently when it comes to their budget. And I think that movie comparison, which is fitting given the way that some of these Hollywood studios with streaming are struggling with like also people going to the movie theaters. It does seem like a parallel problem where they seem to be kind of caught in this whole thing. So why do you think that we choose these games? You mentioned some age demographics that the younger generation is playing more persistent like games like Fortnite that have like a battle pass and it's kind of games as a service and ongoing. We're not playing through like a story. And so I'm sure that there are some generational shifts there, but as a core concept, why did you get interested in Final Fantasy as a child? What was it that drew you to it first?
Well, it was the stories. These were characters that I fell in love with immediately. I was drawn to the stories. Now, I've always been a big story guy, even from when I first started reading. I always choose fiction over nonfiction, which is interesting as an instructor, as a teacher. But I love fiction. I love worlds. I love well-designed characters. Final Fantasy did that for me. And so that's why I hopped into that. And it's also one of the struggles that I have with games that have no characterization or a narrative or a story is it's just not there or it's not compelling or fleshed out. I don't play a game for gameplay.
Yeah.
I sometimes play a game in spite of gameplay.
Yeah. Well, understanding why you like what you like is challenging. I think about why I first got into games. I enjoyed play and games, but I'm like really social with those things. So I like to play things that involve other people. So I love multiplayer stuff. But even when I play single player stuff, I can't not talk about it with people. So like I'm playing through God of War finally, Ragnarok, and the game is incredible. But I like give a recap to my wife about what I've been doing because I want her to be included in it because that's just kind of how I am. So I like talking about games and playing games or watching people play games just about as much as I enjoy playing them, or sometimes more, depending on like what the type of game is. And it's taken me a while to like understand that motivation even a little bit.
Well, this is a fundamental difference between you and me. I've discovered just in the years that we've known each other. You play games for social, certainly, but also you enjoy the actual gameplay of games.
Yes.
I don't know that I do. Like I love a good gameplay system and I will enjoy playing that, but gameplay loops do nothing for me.
So interesting.
It does nothing for me. Like I don't care about the gameplay loop except get me to the next story sequence.
Yeah, see,
it's just interesting to note that difference between us.
Yeah, I one of my favorite types of games, one of my favorite games probably of all time is FTL, which is Faster Than Light, where it's just a roguelike where you have a ship and you go through and it tells this randomly generated story, and then you either beat it or you die and you start completely over. There is no narrative outside of that which is created in the game, and I think it's engaging. I love managing the little ship and I love playing it on loops. How do you think that we stay involved in the things that we enjoy? Like what kept you engaged with Final Fantasy throughout the years too? Because I think it's different than what first attracts us to it. I think it has to be something that keeps us interested too.
Well, I think that the thing about Final Fantasy is that they've prided themselves on being the standard bearer of immersion. And so I knew that I was going to get the most cutting edge storytelling available in video games.
Okay.
And that was through Final Fantasy, or excuse me, the regular Nintendo Final Fantasies moving into Super Nintendo. When they made that leap over to the PlayStation, PS2, PS3, and then into the modern era, it's just been like, oh my gosh, they do set the standard. Voice acting, music, all that stuff. And so for me, it's telling the stories in greater ways. That's what kept me in Final Fantasy.
Do you think there's more competition in that sector now than there was when 100%. They started? Because they kind of created the market in a lot of ways.
They didn't create it. Dragon Quest or / Dragon Warrior back in the day were also really heavy in that.
So they developed the market.
They really did. They made it more mainstream, I would say.
Okay.
I'm not going to say that they exclusively did it because they wouldn't be who they were without the Dragon Quest series, without Ultima, and things like that. But they definitely made it mainstream, and especially with Final Fantasy VII. I don't. A lot of people think that game is overhyped and overrated, but the impact that it had on the narrative game genre can never be understated.
Well, let's talk for just a second about how games are a product of their time, right? The technology cannot be ignored. Like the differences in graphics that happen and the progress that we've made. I think it's really easy to go back and be a little bit revisionist about the impact or how good a game is or isn't. But it's just like you have to be careful not to apply a modern ethic to a historical context when we're looking and evaluating like stories and media and that kind of stuff. Yeah. And so I think that we have to kind of do the same thing when we're looking at games, because as you get past it, I mean, how many? It's been almost. It'll be 30 years.
30,
in just a few years that game's been out, and everything is it's a product of its time in addition to other things. So I think we have to be a little bit fair in our understanding and questioning.
I think so too, but to your point, the competition is a lot higher today. There are a lot more options when it comes to these AAA story, narrative, immersive experiences. And even though many of these experiences can point back to so many developers say Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy 4, or whatever was their start in love for gaming, you see how they have developed and even in some ways surpass the storytelling of the Final Fantasy series. I think of The Last of Us, of Uncharted. These are amazing story games from Naughty Dog, and it's obvious to me, at least, that they have taken some of the spirit of that Final Fantasy VII stuff and really evolved it for a modern audience. In a way that I think that Square Enix has had to up their game a little bit more. And so the question then to this whole thing is, what is the psyche of these middle schoolers and this younger generation, right? Yeah. That is not gravitating toward these stories and narrative games the way that my generation did. And I think that's an interesting and compelling question, one that I deal with freshmen every year.
Well, if we talk about the base needs, I think there's a quote that we pulled from a New York Times article, Sam von Aaron, pronunciation, forgive me, please, that was published in June of 2020, that kind of goes to the nature of this. He says, games occupy a strange place in our cultural consciousness. Everyone has played a game at some point in their lives. Despite that ubiquity, games are rarely discussed with the same reverence as other media like films or books. For most, games are like chocolate, a guilty pleasure consumed secretly. The game designer Sid Meier once remarked that, quote, a game is a series of interesting choices, unquote. Navigating these choices shapes the course of play, revealing who we are and how we think. Playing a game is an act of exposition. So when we think about motivations, right, I think why we play the story games is one of the things is that a little bit of escape, but I wonder how you would differentiate what our needs are that we approach video games with. Like, what needs in our lives are games filling here?
And I think that that's going to depend on the gamer themselves. I might push back a little bit on that quote where it says that for most games are like chocolate. I think there's a perception games are like chocolate, a guilty pleasure consumed secretly. But when you're talking to somebody that is serious about the games that they play, it's a bit more than a one and done kind of experience. It's something that stays with you. And this, as we've talked about before, it goes into my research, right? You play a game, you integrate it into your memory.
And just a little bit of context, this is about play in general, not just video games. So he's talking really about crossword puzzles. He's talking about like Wordle, talking about all these other things. So it's just like the games that you play don't rise to a level of mainstream social consciousness. So I'll look up a few stats while you kind of keep talking.
No, that's great. And that's a really good clarification, because there are games that don't demand that same level of first person interaction and stuff. Wordle is fundamentally different.
So I guess a question is what needs do games fill in our lives? I have some demographic information based on like ages of people and what percentage play video games whenever you're ready to talk about it as well.
Yeah, I think it depends on the person, right?
Sure.
The person that's playing a game like Wordle is going to be having a different response in a lot of ways than somebody that is playing one of these narrative games, which is different than somebody playing Fortnite. And so what is it that somebody's getting from these things? So what do you have, these categories and demographics?
Well, so in a report, they said that 65% of Americans play video games. Only 65% of Americans play video games. 26% of those are...
65% of Americans play video games?
Yeah, 212 million players per week.
That's A higher percentage than I thought. I
See,
mean, I
but
guess I grew up during the days of like it being so niche.
well, when you expand the categories to include mobile games,
Yeah, that's
which is
true.
exactly what we're talking about, is
That's
like
true.
this like mobile gaming or games as a service
Yeah, that's
versus
true.
like a full story AAA game, right?
Yeah, yeah.
That as you look at the trends that are happening, they make so much money.
God, they do.
Like,
Yeah.
I mean, you're like Farmville, Candy Crush, like
Oh,
all those
Farmville.
things,
Oh my
because
gosh.
you buy these
Yes.
gems and then it does it. So you've got people who are never
Got to
going
go
to pick
check
up
on
a
my radishes.
right. They're never going to pick up a controller, or probably not going to convert
Yeah.
into like a more story based long form AAA game experience.
Mm-hmm.
But they're making up like a significant majority of video game revenue. So when you
Mm.
combine that with the over projection of how much gaming was going to grow in the pandemic, because
Mm-hmm.
they just thought that gravy train was going to continue forever, it seems, and it's like, well, no, everybody's trapped inside, so there's people who are turning to video games and play in these different media forms that they wouldn't normally. And so when they didn't stay and play at the same rate when kind of everything opened back up, I think
Yeah.
it created some of these big shifts and these freak out moments that were happening for these companies that thought they had it all planned out.
Mm. Yeah. No, that's great. And I do wonder, in 10 years when we look back at the
Mm.
pandemic and the impact that it had on the industry, um, what is that landscape going to look like pre and post pandemic and COVID? It's interesting to think about.
Do you think actively about why you're playing a game when you play it, or do you just go by feel? Like when you're not feeling it, you don't play the game. When you are, you do. Or do you like think, I want an escapist game, so I'm going to do a game that I can feel
Mm,
like I'm escape. Like that psychological process feels much more subconscious than it is overt.
the best games, you never wonder why you're playing them.
Okay, I want to chew on
Okay.
that for a second. The best games
The
you
best
never
games you're
wonder.
never going to wonder because it just invites you to enjoy them, right? Um, I'm currently playing Baldur's Gate 3. Okay.
Okay.
And like it's just constantly on my mind. This is a question that I continue to ask myself.
Uh-huh.
Um, Caveat, okay? A brief disclaimer. This is a very well-made game.
Yeah.
It is a 10 out of 10 for a lot of people.
Yeah.
It is fundamentally not my kind of game. Okay, and the reason why it's not is because of the D&D aesthetics, the dice rolls, this particular type of turn-based battle. I like turn-based battle systems, or so I thought, but this one I really, really just it's not my thing.
It's
The
a
movement,
digital tabletop game.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
like at its core, it is a Dungeons and Dragons story
yeah.
that you just live out in video game format.
And it's not me at all. It's the same reason. Oh gosh, this is a crazy comparison, but maybe I can better explain
You
it.
can stick the landing, I believe.
It's the reason why I play soccer and not football. Football is
Okay.
turn-based and soccer is action. Okay?
Okay.
Like that's it,
There
okay?
you go.
And it's like I'm like I just want to move. I just
Yeah.
want to move. Like don't
I
give
don't
me
want to
these
wait.
constraints.
Yeah.
I don't want to wait and stuff. So
That is true.
that is not to say anything about Baldur's Gate 3 other than it's not my kind of game, and yet I am playing it and I am enjoying a lot of it. But I do have to ask my question in the second or third 60-minute battle of my day, because I'm really bad at the game too.
Poor
Why
thing.
am I playing this game? And so the answer is I like the characters. I'm
Okay.
enjoying the story enough to overcome the parts of this game that I do not like.
And you're playing
Okay.
it with a friend.
With a friend.
So
Couch
there's
co-op, not online, because
Yeah.
I can drop an online game if I don't like it. But a couch co-op game, there's more accountability, I guess.
Yeah.
And there's that, like, we're like looking at each other and laughing and like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, this is silly. But
Social aspect. Okay,
Yeah.
well here's 5 like examples of
Okay.
like needs or motivations that we could like explore in video games. One is
Yeah.
the need for challenge and achievement.
yeah.
One is the need for escapism and immersion.
Mm,
One is the need for relaxation and stress relief.
Okay.
One is the need for problem solving and creativity.
Mm-hmm.
And the other would be for the need for emotional resonance. Right? You want to see a story that resonates and you can see yourself in.
So which one would you say you are of those five?
I think they're all five. I think of those five, they're all present, right? So thinking about which games fulfill which moments and which games, this is when you talk about like the good games invite you in, right? Like I wish I would have written down exactly what you said.
Yeah.
I'll go back and pull it, but the really great games hit on at least all five of these, right?
Yeah.
They move you between challenge, immersion, relaxation, problem solving and creativity, and emotional resonance. When you have something that hits that in that like multifaceted way, that's how you know. I think the challenge when it comes to things that we're passionate about or things that move us, right? When like something moves you or is interesting to you, it can be really challenging to unpack it in a way that you can share it with others. Like I feel like a lot of the time when I try to explain something that's meaningful to me or like was impactful, especially in like a game format, I feel like I'm 9 years old again in the backseat of my mom's car, jabbering at her about Pokemon.
Yeah.
Like just, thank you, Mom. I love you. Thanks for putting up with me. But you see, I didn't have like good language to express what about collecting the characters in the cards made me feel, right? So my question to you is, what are some ways that you have found that you understand why you're enjoying and engaging with a certain part of something, and how do you translate that into sharing that experience in language that people can engage with without playing 10,000 hours of Final Fantasy games?
So I think with adults, at least, it's different with kids because kids are they like what they like and they're going to talk about what they like in sometimes the most annoying ways possible because like I don't care about Roblox, but I'm so happy for you. But for most of us, I think that it's identifying what is it that we like about this game and how does that contextualize for people that don't understand necessarily the games. For me, it's less important for me to say I love Final Fantasy as a game and you should too. I like to say, so I'm playing this game, and I know that you're not a gamer. The story of this game has really impacted me, and to kind of talk about it in those terms and stuff. And it's like, if somebody ever asks me about games that I like, I will usually compare it, if they're not a gamer, I'll usually compare it to a movie series or something like that. I'm like, it's kind of like Lord of the Rings that you can play. Or, what was it? Blade Runner, but it's interactive. And that's like Cyberpunk or something like that. It's just a very loose sort of thing. It's like, but it's taken me on an experience and a journey with some characters that are just amazing. So I think that figuring out which of those five is most compelling to you and how it works for immersion. I think that we are moving into a day where immersive storytelling is becoming the norm. I mean, you look at things that Disney is doing right now with their park experiences and even trying to do things through VR and their new gaming landscape. We're seeing storytelling being raised up to the next level in non-gaming spaces. Yeah.
So taking the time to understand a little bit behind why you choose the games that you do and why you like the things that you like can help you to create some language and a lens to be able to share them with others. I think it goes to your point where you talked about, I'll go back to the quote, for most games are like chocolate, a guilty pleasure consumed secretly. So for something that you invest as much time in and can be so formative, when we talk about games can take you deeper, we talk about with this show, we want to do and model and talk about things that springboard us into the life that we want. If we're going to invest this time into video games, there is some real opportunity for us to understand those things. And so what advice would you give to somebody who has a difficult time really talking about the things in video games that they love because like you haven't played it for 400 hours, so you just wouldn't understand? It's like, how do we make these concepts more approachable and share them with people in our lives? What would you say?
Yeah, and that's almost a gatekeepy sort of thing. I mean, the brand is never gonna to grow if we just say, well, you'll never understand that because you haven't played it. And that's not our goal. But if we really do believe that this is a medium that is artful, it offers something to creative arts that nothing else can. If we believe that this is the most immersive method of storytelling, then these are things that we should share and put out there in the world. And so how do you speak about it in a way that doesn't come off as elitist or weird, to say it quite bluntly, you know? And I think that whenever I talk to anybody, and shoot, I do this every semester at the beginning, I always try to think, who's in the room? Okay. So I've got an Alpha Chi Omega and a Sigma Chi in the room, as well as an engineering major. Those are fraternities and sororities, sorry. As well as an engineering major. I've got a pre-med over here. I've got my creative arts minor in the back. Yeah. I've got literally everybody. I've got a girl who's never played video games, and I've gotten somebody who, you know, is on the esports team. My question as I introduce Final Fantasy 15 for a lecture, to make a point about Jewish kingship narratives, is how do I get them to think of this not as a game, but as an experience that's going to help them understand life better? And I think not everybody can do that, but I begin with the end in mind.
Yeah.
What do I want them to feel and experience from this?
You have used the language that video games are a bit of a modern mythology.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that? And when you talk about the lessons we can learn from it the same way that myths and stories told those lessons, I wonder if that has some relevance here.
Every culture in all of history has what they would refer to as central or core myths. They are stories where they make meaning of the world around them. These are stories, parables, or proverbs that help societies evolve into what they want. It's through these stories and myths that you can see a culture's virtues in things that they are disgusted by, their highest ideals and hopes and wishes for life, for beyond life, and for their community. In modern culture, those mythologies have taken all kinds of forms. Some are in the form of religion. Others are in the form of stories and books. In the not too recent distant past, we've had movies. And now we're moving into an age of interactive mythology where we are able to experience these stories in games that are holding deep in our hearts, where you play as the hero. You don't just read about Hercules. You're playing the experience of the highest virtue model or the things that disgust you. You're experimenting and exploring. And I think that mythology is what is going to be forming these generations. In the same way as I can recall how I felt when I finished Final Fantasy VII, or when I finished, Dragon's Quest, or whatever it is, The Last of Us, the first one. I mean, I remember the night that I finished The Last of Us, and I sat with my roommate at the time, and we talked for 3 hours until like 3, 4 in the morning, talking about the ending of that game, weighing all of it. I share that not because of that one and done experience, but because that's a formative core key memory for me in helping me think through my ethics. Well, Fortnite is doing this today. These students, junior hires currently, who are spending money on loot boxes and battle passes and all that stuff, they're building relationships and memories where they will forever remember that season, those characters, their favorite loadout, and the experience that they had. Because they're learning ethics. They're learning how to relate to the world in an interactive playground in a way that non-gamers can't really understand, but they will when this generation takes the marketplace.
That is going to be an interesting thing to unpack for another segment about the lessons that are learned through these games as a service and what opportunities or obligations some of these developers have to kind of the common good and what they do when they have people's attention and money on their platforms.
When Grand Theft Auto 6 comes out, we have to have this conversation. Because there's ethical dilemmas in there, and I'm a big proponent that video games do not create villains. Okay, like I do not. Okay, that's a whole other segment. But I don't think that video games make you more or less violent or anything like that. But there's research that backs it.
The research
we can
backs
get to that.
Well, we'll see if the research backs it up. So we've just spawned 2 plus extra segments. For this next one. Thanks for the time and the conversation. Sometimes I just don't think about why I enjoy the things that I enjoy, but I definitely do believe that with greater intentionality and just a little bit of energy for understanding why I'm enjoying something, I will be able to experience it in a way that's more rich and more real for my life by being able to actually talk about it rather than just being like, you wouldn't understand.
Yeah.
It'd be good. All right.
Have you ever had a game where you were like, this is a moment of epiphany and it translated to real life? Gosh. And yet it's so weird for me to go to a friend and be like, I just played this game and now I know what I want to do with my life.
Yeah. I mean, there's a couple that like really stick out. That I'll just tell you as an aside, and we can just, if this is the end of the segment, bye.
We can edit this out, but
I played I was in the area of Ragnarok where Atreus has his dream and he wakes up and he's in the Ironwood, I think is where he is, with the giants, which was just a spectacular
just amazing
area. Anyways.
Immaculate, yeah.
Then you meet what's-her-face grandma.
Yeah.
And it just all of a sudden out of nowhere becomes this incredible allegory for like how family members experience addiction.
Yes.
And it's like out of nowhere, she steals their souls of these animals to live in this memory, to feel something for a moment, but it's not real and it's not permanent, but she just chains these moments together to feel alive and feel like it's real. And then you have to take her chalice, her bowl or whatever it is, and you have to steal it from her and break it. And then she just screams these horrible things for breaking her ability to experience her addiction at her granddaughter. And it's just like, and I'm just sitting there and it's like, you do those moments where you stay up too late playing, but then the problem is the story just keeps getting better.
Keeps going,
so it's so late at night and I'm like just trying to get past this thing and I'm having a great time with it, but then I'm like emotionally exhausted.
Yeah.
And then now I'm spinning and thinking about addiction and families and how this relates and how well that was done. And I was like, now I should have gone to bed 2 hours ago. Now I'm supposed to go to bed after this?
Yeah. There's been so many times in my life when I've done that. I mean, yes. And there's something about those moments that's just like, it begs you to interact with it in real time.
And it's totally different than watching or reading because you're pushing the character forward. You're not just turning a page. You're not just not stopping the autoplay on a TV series.
Well, it's assimilation. And that's a perfect example of you actively integrating the game into your own life. I mean, that's a fantasy to reality, to be honest. That's good.
It was wild. Between that and then the perpetuation of the cycle of violence in Last of Us Part 2.
Oh,
it's just like,
yes.
Oh, it's great. They just did such an incredible job.
For all the flack that game gets, I loved it, but it always makes me wonder in my actions with other people, am I perpetuating a cycle of violence? Or does this lead to the ending that I would want, or am I about to go to that beach?
Dude, there's a couple moments that it just throws it right back in your face that were really interesting. And I will say, to the criticisms of the things, it if you're not getting pushback and criticism, you're probably not saying much of anything.
Yeah, agreed.
As far as like narratives and stuff like that goes, when you look at something academically, you know, it's open to criticism and that kind of stuff. But the narratively, like, you know, if you're not rustling some feathers, then it's probably not an interesting story worth experiencing anyways. Like if it's just a wholesome thing and you want to do it. But if you're really trying to look at like things that exist in human experience, those are very messy.
Yeah, they are. This is what was said when I was presenting my dissertation. You know, and they like, as I was writing this thing, somebody said, if everybody agrees with what you're saying, then you haven't done anything new. But instead, a dissertation and good research is always going to call into question some other traditionally accepted model.
Challenge. It's going to challenge.
And it's going to challenge it. It's going to, and I think that's exactly the case with art. How does it challenge and subvert expectations of what should be, could be, or is?
And you talked about the character creator and the difference between a story that's preset that you control the character, a story that you make a character, and then a story that you make a character and can change the outcome, and how those different paths are experienced differently. It makes me think of Last of Us Part 2, because we're doing the scene where you first control Abby, and I get Abby. First of all, when I thought the game was over pretty much, and then it launches and I'm playing Abby. No, this is in the middle of this
in the middle, yeah.
And I'm playing Abby, and I'm like, oh, it's a flashback, and I'm playing Abby. Okay, I've played Abby before, no big deal. But then there's experience points.
Yeah.
And I'm like, whoa.
I remember that moment, yes.
I was like, what? Why would I need experience for this flashback?
Game. Yes.
And then I realized, oh my word, there's an entire other half of this game. And then there's another half hiding. That's 5 false endings.
You're so right. It's like a half, another half, and then the final half. So and that math adds up.
When I got Abby back to Ellie, and you have to fight in the thing, yes. I just let Ellie kill Abby like 6 times. Because I was like, I'm not gonna fight her.
I'm not doing it. I think so many people did that.
Because I was like, I want this, like, I need this to end. Like, this needs to end. Like, this, like, and so it just, but having to fight that through, and then having to have that fight on the beach at the end to just like really just be miserable within that cycle of violence.
Oh, I think it's perfect. I do. And it unsettles you in just the right way.
It's horrible.
I mean, it's the same thing as oh shoot, I don't remember which Call of Duty it was, but it's the no Russian level where you play that classic level and you have to shoot an airport, right? You can skip it, but I chose to play it for research. But it was
research for what exactly, Wade?
Oh yeah, I should clarify. I was researching my own psyche. But that game, that level, I mean, it's a visceral reaction. You feel like you hate doing it, and yet it to this day makes me think, you know, what do undercover operatives have to do that they don't align with, but it's for the quote greater good, you know? And it's like, how do you do that? And that game, I mean, I played it 10, 12 years ago or whatever, and it still sticks with me.
When games can explore that in such a different way.
Oh, absolutely. It is so different to play through that level and do these heinous things versus reading about it or even watching it. Because you're the one, especially in those games, pulling the trigger.
Perpetrating. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, yes. So,
well, good side discussion. If this is where we end the segment, bye everybody. Thanks for.
Yeah, that was great.
Okay, it is the middle of the episode, which means that it's time to hit that music for our Minigame Stretch Break. Thank you, everybody. All right, everybody.
That had some vigor to
that
it.
One did, because we need a stretch break. Okay, first I'm getting stretched, and I'm going to stretch and show you a Millie stretching 2 Millies. stretching too.
Oh, everybody stretch, not
Everybody
Daisy back here.
stretches. Daisy, are you going to stretch?
No, she is sound asleep.
Oh, yeah. We have the bingo wheel of vulnerability. We have our geek therapy cards for our get to know you questions here for the minigame stretch break. So we are stretching our bodies and we're stretching our minds. If you're on the YouTube, you can see Millard.
All
right. Everybody, we pick a number between 1 and 50 because there are 50 numbers in this thing. And see if you get it. All right. I got to pick a number. What number do you want this time, Wade?
32.
Listener, you can pick your own number. I'm going to pick 12. All right, so 12 and 32. Listener, pick your number. You hear the bingo wheel of vulnerability spinning. Tell me when, Wade.
When.
And what number? You said 32 and I said 12, right?
I said 32, yes.
That number is 4.
4 it is.
Listener, if you guessed 4, you were correct. Congratulations.
Okay, here it is. Sorry, I picked the wrong deck. What? There we go. Now we got it. Okay. The art of video game development is making a game that guides the player in setting and achieving goals. The game itself provides consistent feedback and encouragement as to motivate and empower the player. We don't always get that in real life, but if we could, what would that look like to you? Who would be giving you the experiencing points and how frequently? How could your life goals be reframed to feel more achievable? So, let me re-ask those questions. The game itself provides consistent feedback and encouragement as to motivate and empower the player. We don't get that in real life a lot of times, but how would that look like to you? Who gives experience points? How frequently? How could your life goals be reframed?
Okay, so who is it in your life that is your level up screen that you process your growth and development with? Is that the question?
Yeah, sorry, there's something
It's just a very emotional question.
It's very...
who is it?
Yeah, and what would it look like to get that feedback and encouragement of goal setting and achieving goals?
Oh, yeah. Life? So I'm the kind of person that loves to create idealized systems and then rage against that which I have created for myself.
Sure, you are a micromanager that hates yourself.
Yeah, I'd say my strategic mind is judgmental of my.
You're constantly side-eyeing yourself.
I am. I reinvent myself every night before I fall asleep. Right? Like it's like, oh, tomorrow's going to be different because I'm going to do these things and these things differently. And then you fall asleep, and half the time you forget what you were talking about. So I think what it would be like for me, I'm not a big measurer and tracker. I've been thinking a lot about this statement that here I'll read here. It was from a business development video that I was watching. It said, when progress is measured, progress improves. When progress is measured and reported, the rate of progress increases. So I'll just let that be what it is. I'll read it one more time. Where progress is measured, progress improves. When progress is measured and reported, the rate increases. And I think that statement has been challenging to me. And so I think measuring and reporting would be something that would be, I don't know how I would do it, but I just don't track things. So what about you?
I have a journal called the Full Focus Planner. I visit it every morning, and it gives me space to think through what are my top 3 goals to achieve this particular day. And so that's how I measure and report on things. What it essentially does is it gives me quest markers, okay? Yeah. Where I'm accomplishing these things, and at the very end of my day, I'm like, okay, I at least did these 3 things. Maybe write a chapter of this book or an outline of a video script or streaming or whatever it is, so that I don't feel like I've wasted aimlessly. You ever been in the game and you just feel like you did nothing? Like maybe, like I sometimes just like, as somebody that takes a lot of pictures in video games, yes. Like There are times when I just am like, did I play the game? And I did, but it's just like I accomplished nothing. It didn't turn into a single quest. I don't want my real life to feel like that. And so that's why the full focus planner has been really, really helpful to me. But I also need people, people like you, people that are in my life that are like, hey, how is that thing going? So maybe it's that timely coffee conversation that you have with somebody, and that's who's giving me experience points and an attaboy leveling up or something.
Well, there you go. Well, as we continue our minigame stretch break, listener, for you, what does that look like for you? What does it look like to have some feedback and some ability to really decipher the ways that you've grown and leveled up and process the world around you? Think about it. Talk to somebody. Tell somebody thank you when they're that in your life. And we'll see you in the next segment. Hey everyone, we are now going to go into part 2 of our character creator series. Let's find out what we learned in part 1.
Last time we talked about how I tortured people in The Sims.
How Wade ran a WWE fight club in college.
And how ABC stole the concept of The Bachelor from me.
So that being said, if you want to catch up on this first part of this segment, you can listen to episode 1, but we just caught you up on everything you need to know. So just keep letting that roll, and let's check out the second part of our 3-part series on character creators. So when it comes to the ability to create these characters, let's talk a little bit about how we got here in games, because we can start from like general play and like tabletop games. I think are probably a great. I know that you don't play a lot of like role-playing tabletop games, but I think we probably need to mention it as like the root of a lot of the history, because that is where you could make your own character.
Oh, right?
I mean, you could give their name, you could give them descriptions, these vivid backstories.
Yeah.
But then from there, that started to inspire a lot of video games. Early video games, you really didn't have much of a choice to choose your character. But I do remember even arguing over like player 1, player 2, or if one was like red and one was blue in the controller, and fighting over controllers, right?
I mean,
there's this desire for agency even in the earliest days of things.
That's fair. My brother and I would oftentimes fight. And even to this day, I think that he has more of a leaning toward Luigi than he does Mario, but that's second board. Hey, you want to hear something hilarious about that? Oh my gosh. So my brother, when he got married, he had a bachelor party, and I was in charge of this. In addition to all the things you do over a weekend and stuff, there was one thing, all the groomsmen, I said to them, you get a gift for my brother, and we have to make him earn it. So he has to take on all of these different challenges to earn it. So they did wild things, like you have to build a raft from trees and sail across the lake. I mean, these were things that like we made him do. Here's what I made him do, okay? I created on this kind of like lakeside house sort of thing that we were staying at for the weekend, an obstacle course, okay, that emulated Mario Brothers level 1-1. And I made him wear a Luigi hat. And here's what I told him. I said, you have always been player 2, but moving forward, you have to be player 1. Like, you don't get to be player 2 in your marriage, but you have to be, player 1 alongside your wife, because you are creating your own future with your wife, right? But you've always lived in my shadow as player 2. Only something that a big brother can say, right? And I was like, so you have to do this. So now listen, he put on this Luigi hat and ran this obstacle. I said, but one caveat, I'm no longer Mario, I'm now Bowser. And I had a paintball gun and was shooting fireballs at him the entire time. Perfect. And this was that was it. That's how I sent him off. So
I think that's great. Were there coins like that he
there
had
were
to
coins,
collect?
and there was a star at the top of a flagpole he had to climb at the end. I mean, it was the whole deal. I went full force in this. It was amazing.
That is not surprising at all.
And
that you would do that.
When I go after something, I go full on.
Yeah, no, that's a great memory. But I mean, I think that is the core of it, right?
Yeah.
Like whenever you have choice, there you start to see yourself in it, and the way that you embody choices just because they are your reality, like interesting, because we would do it with different like airplanes or jets in games.
Yeah.
And in the early Final Fantasy, the earliest time that I remember being able to name a character is probably the Oregon Trail. Do you remember that game?
Did
you play that one much?
Who doesn't? I mean, I never got past dysentery with it, but yeah.
I don't think anyone ever did.
No one lives.
No one
lives.
And the trail to Oregon, there are no survivors.
No, there are no.
So we would do that. We would name, well, of course, the first thing that we did as kids would be to name our characters after different people. And then when misfortune would fall on them, it was
different. Yeah.
It would almost come to blows because you also got to choose like the treatment that you were going to do when someone fell ill, right? So once we realized that there was a correlation to survival and like efficiency of time, like for example, if one of our characters fell ill and there were 3 or 4 of us watching the game, we're like, well, the options are press on, rest, go to town and get some medicine or something. And so if it was you, you're like, get the medicine.
Save
and
me.
Then like you'd be like clawing to try and hit the button on the keyboard while like people are holding you back. I mean, the intensity of these memories is coming back to me.
Well, real life resentment, right? Hey, I remember I've not played a lot of D&D. In fact, I've only done one campaign and it fell apart like before we got to the end because I was playing. There were a group of roommates that were housing it for all of us, and some of their real life issues kind of came out in the middle of it. I assume
that's never happened ever before.
I know, never, right? And so like, I mean, I'm like, it's a Wild West sort of thing, and so I'm just like a free spirit rogue, sort of like with a big Western trench coat, enjoying my vibe, but a little mysterious. That was my backstory.
I love that it's a brief story, but you remember your character, their attitude, and their garb in detail.
Because you
lived it.
It was real to you. It's not that I just lived it, but they said, we need you to make a character sketch of your character, right? I didn't realize there was a form. I freaking drew him. I have a picture of him. So I'll have to find it and send it to you. We can put it in clip it in post or whatever. But like, he's awesome.
What was that character's name?
Ryder, R-Y-D-E-R.
With the southern accent, Ryder.
But that was also the name that I did. I did. It was a good old southern twang.
Would it be possible to get just a brief? Can I give you a statement
several years ago
in Ryder's voice?
But like his basic sort of persona and personality was going back to text-based games. The simple ... So everything was like one word, gruff, mysterious. So it was like, I don't think that's a good idea. And it was things like that, right?
You let the space in between the words say everything you need to say.
That's all you need. I mean, things like that, like.
He's just a more
that dog.
Colonel Sanders meets Clint Eastwood from.
That's exactly it. That dog don't hunt.
I can just see you doing that to try and diffuse a very tense situation where like a real life couple is arguing about something.
So they're fighting and like one of them left the other for dead and went to strike at the enemy, the boss, instead of heal the guy, and then the guy bled out. And I think that my response was something like, let the dead bury their dead. And we just have to keep going.
That's why I only
so I didn't diffuse the situation, but I was like, oh,
we stayed in character. I'm honestly good for you.
Because I'm a role player. That's what I'm saying.
This has to happen later. Like we're gonna have to run some sort of
D&D.
We need to get somebody to run it, and we need to get a few choice characters and
the resurrection of Ryder. That's what I need. To bring him back.
D&D. Ryder's resurrection.
Listen, this guy had the best backstory that I never ever got into. Okay, like he was a soldier for an army that was like colonizing the West. Okay, like it was out of control, and then he was taken to the edge and forced to do things that he didn't want to do. Like his battalion or whatever was scorching an entire Native American village, okay? And they fought back and like drove off the battalion, but they captured Ryder, okay? And then it was like a Pocahontas sort of situation where a translator between the chief and Ryder fell in love. Okay.
This is the backstory of
my character.
You basically took Cloud from Final Fantasy and dropped him in Dances with Wolves.
I did.
Like that's like
he also had spiky blonde hair. You said a very large sword. I'm telling you that, but like we never got to that part because like I guess I miswrote him or like it was only supposed to be like a 6-week thing, but it ended on week 4 because of real life drama.
Yeah.
But like eventually there was like this backstory that was going to come out, but that's like an act 2 sort of thing. And like, it was a 6-week sort of.
This feels back to the nature of character creators and how deeply we get attached to things. This feels like your story of Ryder is unresolved.
It's unresolved. And I feel like one day I'd love to see Ryder revisited. Ooh, that'd be good. Ryder revisited.
That's
good.
That's good. Ryder revisited. This is amazing.
This is incredible.
Well, I love how much it means to you because you spent time on it, right?
I did.
The things that we invest in and the things that we spend our time on and our imagination on, we give a piece of ourselves to them.
Yeah.
That's kind of the idea that we can operate in with some of these things. And so
that's exactly right. Let me say that, like, with the things that we create, there is a deeply personal aspect to it. Now, a lot of people would say, I'm not a very creative type. I just follow archetypes and all this kind of stuff. Like, I press the auto generate for both the name and the aesthetic. But there becomes this kinship with the avatar that you've created that is you. And you're experiencing the world through the eyes and the movement and the agency of this particular avatar. And so you do get connected to it. This is why, and this is the core of my research academically, this is why when you play a game, you create first-person memories. I mean, your brain translates and encounters games differently than it does movies, books, and videos, anything like that. You internalize it. I've said it on literally every podcast I've ever been on. It is the reason why when you talk to someone or a child, right, say talking about their experience with Mario, they never say, well, yeah, Mario saved the princess. They always say what? I saved the princess. Right? It's always that first person thing. That is the simplest way to describe what's happening in the processes of the brain. And so when you have the agency of like, oh yeah, I created this character, even in its most simplistic forms, that's a piece of you. And what happens to that character deeply affects you and you feel it differently. I think it's the coolest thing about video games.
I think it is so interesting the way that we don't realize how early we recognize that feeling of agency. So I remember playing Super Smash Brothers with some friends and his younger cousin who couldn't have been more than 2, 3, 4, right? And he wanted to play and he always wanted to be Red Mario. He wanted to be Red Mario.
Okay.
Red Mario.
Red Mario.
And we didn't have the controller plugged in one time and he is just really doing, it's not working. Like he didn't really know. He knew that when he moved the stick, he could see the character, but we were like, oh, he may not notice or whatever. And he just he's like pleading with us. He goes, it's not working. Yeah. I'm not in control of this. And like, he knew what was going on. And he was at an age where I went, oh my gosh, like he is like really like this lived experience is really embodied.
He's keyed in. And this is what, and I think Nintendo has gotten this earlier than most other game developers. It is this idea of like gaming is accessible inherently in the human experience. And so what can you do to make it, cookies on the bottom shelf sort of thing? Like I started playing games when I was 5 years old when my dad brought home a Nintendo Entertainment System. I didn't know what a video game was, but I knew like I'm this little guy, Mario, I guess, and I make my way to the flagpole. And at the end of this, there's a mushroom guy or there's a princess. But like, that's all I needed to know.
It's enough.
And it works or it doesn't work, I guess. Like, I didn't have to think through, like, sometimes gamers have these like high-minded conversations about like technology or is this game good or not. When you're 5 years old, it's like, no, that's me. This is fun. And that's the building blocks of the entire experience of gaming, I think.
We do put a lot of pressure on ourselves to have more fun or enough fun or more interesting fun. And the way that you interact with the character on the screen personally, do you think it's always overtly conscious, or do you think there's some subconscious elements that are just latent when you're in control of something rather than just watching something happen? And maybe do you think there's a difference in games where you can actually make decisions or where you're just controlling the character on kind of a bit of a set story? Because I think there's some distinctions here that we would need to explore around character creators as they relate to the type of game.
Yeah, so I have different perspectives on the second question. The first question that you mentioned, I think that actually, can you rephrase the first part of that question again? I want to make sure that I'm really understanding it.
So when we're playing a game, right, there's those things where you say, I'm going to do this because I want this to happen, or I'm making the character jump, or I am doing this part of the story. And so we say, this is important to me because I am in control of this game. Do you think a lot of that is overtly conscious, or do you think that even if we would say, I don't really care about this, I'm just playing the game, there's something going on subconsciously that is helping us memorialize or connect with it?
I think that it has to do with the player in that respect. Because I mean, you and I play games for different reasons. You are big on gameplay. I'm big on story. And so if a goal is not compelling to me, then I'm out, right? But if a goal is compelling to me, no amount of bad gameplay is going to keep me from that goal.
Fascinating.
Right? Like I have a high tolerance for bad gameplay if the story is compelling enough for me to continue.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's it. And if there is not a story, and because I do play for story and that kind of sort of role playing sort of element, there's a lot of sins that I can look over if it's a good experience in that respect.
I mean, it makes you think about the people in your life, right? Your friends, your family, and the things that motivate them. Because I think it goes to motivation.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, as to what, and I think there's different tolerances that we would have for it than others. Because there's some stories that I get super into. It's the same thing with a TV show. I'll watch a bad TV show if I want to see how it resolves. Whereas other friends won't. But with the gameplay, there's something about the active engagement and the demand of the attention that you're right. You absolutely nailed how I feel.
And I would dare. Oh man, that's a really interesting point, because I have zero tolerance for a good story told poorly in a TV show. But a game, I'm like, this good game played poorly, or like with bad gameplay, I am willing to see it through to the end. It's really interesting.
I think it's tolerance too, just to speak for myself. There's tolerance for worlds that are created that I just want to spend more time in, like mentally.
You're telling me.
That I will engage with content that maybe it doesn't achieve a ton of critical acclaim, or is criticized, or isn't frankly very great and could have been done better, because I want to see their interpretation of the world. I want to be more curious about the different characters or the setting or how they would do those things. And it's like, once it has my curiosity, it's over. Like, I can't.
I mean, you're talking to maybe the number one fan of Final Fantasy 15, one of the most reviled games of all time. Maybe.
Really?
I don't know. I mean, people really don't like, and there's a whole development history, expectations of what that game could have been when it was called Versus 13.
Give me one extremely oversimplified sentence spoken to an elementary schooler.
Final Fantasy 15 began as a game called Final Fantasy Versus 13 that was extremely dark and very meta with very high gameplay possibilities. However, when the director was taken off of the project and replaced, it became a bit more of a simpler game with a focus not so much on dynamic and dark gameplay, but on the bonds of friendship and even divine warfare. That was a disappointment to those that wanted the first.
That was a very good sentence. A very heavy, however. And then a semicolon.
Yeah, it's a long sentence, but
is Final Fantasy 15? Please don't kill me. The one with the car.
It's the one with the car. Like that's like the car is like a character in that one. Yeah.
Yeah. Herbie.
Not quite like that, but similar.
We used to play putt putt. There was a game called Putt Putt was a car that would backfire. Putt 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 Putt, and we controlled the car. And so anybody out there who played Putt Putt growing up as a kid, not Putt Putt golf, but
I mean that's basically the spiritual predecessor of Final Fantasy 15. I would say Putt Putt.
I'm just going to share this with you. Well, I can't share it with you. Just Google Putt Putt. It's a purple car with cartoon eyebrows and a dog rides in the back. I think, honestly, you would have loved Putt Putt.
Oh my God, there he is.
He's amazing.
Big Top Circus.
He had all sorts
entertainment.
Dude, he had all sorts of adventures.
Well, look at that pretty little dog.
My brother and I in Putt Putt went
miles
everywhere.
Of Putt Putt. Putt Putt joins the parade. He goes to the zoo. He travels through time. Maybe this is a predecessor.
He does. We got a little existential. I think we're seeing a lot of the inspiration.
Putt Putt kills God? What? It is a Final Fantasy. Everything is Final Fantasy. Putt Putt has existential crisis. Putt Putt has amnesia, cannot remember his hometown.
Oh gosh, I wish they would have numbered them like Final Fantasy games, like the Putt Putt 1, 2, and 3,
but only in Roman numerals.
Right, but then just to confuse the kids, you go back and call them 4, 5, and 6.
Putt Putt versus 13. Yeah, absolutely.
As a kid, I don't know if I could have handled multiple Putt Putt discs.
Putt Putt meets the Whispers. That's a deep dive for Final Fantasy 7 fans.
Gosh. It was lessons on like overcoming obstacles and friendships, and
it was. Sure it was.
Listen, I will not have the good name of Putt Putt just besmirched here in this chat.
I know that we've talked about a segment called Games That We Hate, making each other play games that we hate. Putt Putt could be a big contender for me.
It's
for
just
you
like
to
a
make me
story
play
game.
that game.
It's just a story game where you click. Like, did you ever play like? I think it's called Space Quest.
No, I did not play Space Quest. What are you doing to me? Space Quest.
Oh yeah, you have no idea. You have. They have.
This is the most like AI generated Twitch avatar logo I've ever seen. Space Quest. I mean, it's just very indicative of the 90s, I guess.
I think we probably need to give people some context. So I didn't grow up playing console games. I have played those at my friends' houses. We had a PC that we were allowed to install games on. So
How are we friends?
That is how I grew up. And eventually
it's a very different origin story between us.
Part of it, but we are approaching it from like if I wanted to play games, I had to learn how to type on MS-DOS and like hit enter to load the games, because if you loaded them in Windows 3.1, the computer didn't have enough memory to run the game and the operating system. So you had to boot into DOS and then like put up like floppy disk games were like my first. Anyways, it doesn't matter.
You just like torture and pain. Like that's what PC gaming.
I'm conditioned. Like I see myself as a character that is conditioned.
You have a high tolerance.
I do.
Okay, so while you were discussing that, I did Google Space Quest. What is this? What I just found here?
It was essentially like a point and click adventure.
Who are these pig people with mohawks?
Yeah, they're characters. So you would choose different things, and as you went through the game, like terrible things would happen to your character, and there was like some comedy. I'm gonna make you play this one.
Oh my gosh, this one's gonna be pain for me.
Not even games that we hate, games from your childhood that you missed.
Games from your childhood you've missed. Now that'd be a fun segment.
Like $20 to buy this whole thing. I cannot wait to talk to my brother about this.
Wait, this game is $20 in 2024 of the year of our Lord?
It's all of them.
Oh, all of them? Well, that doesn't make it much better, I guess. But
it's a point and click. Did you not play like Myst back in the day on the computer?
I did play Myst. Myst was I thought there would be a really good story with Myst, but I was also a child. Yeah, see, I don't know. But again, kind of going back to our primary conversation somewhere back in the recesses of this, and I think this goes to the second part of your question that I didn't really get to. Like, again, it depends on the player, but I think there's something about experiencing a curated story that's laid out for you. For example, like the reason why I love Final Fantasy is because I'm not making the story, but I have a conduit for experiencing a story that it has themes and stuff that help me think about life.
Right.
This is one of the reasons why I really was late to the MMO party, because I never felt like they could tell a story that was as engaging when it had to be intentionally vague. I think that's why Final Fantasy XIV has been such a marvel to me. I enjoyed World of Warcraft. There's two things I liked about World of Warcraft. Number one, I got to hang out with my friends even though I was living in other states. Number two...
Massive.
Yeah. Number two was the fact, and this wasn't until Wrath of the Lich King, that was a story that felt good. Felt like a Final Fantasy, honestly. And I was like, I'm here for this. There was one instanced dungeon where you're following this like flashback of Arthas that I remember, and it's like his downfall. It felt to me like the Nibelheim flashback in Final Fantasy VII. It's the origin story of his dark turn. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is it. This is what it could be. Final Fantasy XIV capitalized on that. And that's why I'm like, okay, if you can do it like that, then I'm in. But if it's simply like, here's the world, it's your playground, make your own story, well, that's not quite as interesting to me personally. I like that narrative beginning, middle, and end. I think.
So there's, for lack of a better term, more on rails storytelling, right? Where the actions are going to happen and you have very little choice.
Yeah.
And then there's more kind of open-ended. You can do it like a Bethesda game where you can choose to complete a quest or not. You can just off one of the quest givers and they just let you alter the story in like a big way.
And that's a really interesting point. Nothing like I think that Bethesda games are very well made and all that kind of stuff, but for whatever reason, they don't connect with me quite the same way. But I think you're hitting on it.
Well, I had never really played like any of like the Naughty Dog games that are more kind of cinematic and direct like that. And I think a lot of those games came out on like PlayStation and were PlayStation exclusives for such a long time that I actually played them for the first time with you, where I was like, oh, I've never played like an Uncharted game. And you gave me the classic, Wade, what? Like, how can you call yourself a gamer? Possible? Right, exactly. And I was like, well, I don't know. I don't know.
Because you were playing Space Quest and Putt Putt.
It makes more sense now, doesn't it?
Doesn't it? It's like, Putt Putt to Nathan Drake arc is not what I was expecting.
They're pretty similarly on rails.
That's fair.
Well, some of these games you couldn't really save either, so you had to learn how to make all the decisions to not die.
The good old days when gamers were gamers.
Yeah, resiliency was forced upon us.
That dog don't hunt.
Yeah, thank you, writer. It's nice for you to make.
Just revisiting him.
Yeah, it's a callback. It's a good callback.
It's a callback.
What do you call it? Writer's Return.
Writer's Return. There's a lot of alliteration.
Writer's Return. Parentheses. Requiem. 16. Requiem. Now it's a Final Fantasy game.
352 over 28 fractions. Kingdom Hearts.
I always just felt like I just didn't understand. It was something in like the Japanese that I didn't understand, and that's why we have these naming conventions.
That's kind of
how I found out it's not.
It's not. It just
it's
isn't.
just a deliberate choice.
No, with Final Fantasy 7, there are some. We won't get into that, but yeah.
No, we can talk about it.
Well, okay. So, did you know that after Final Fantasy 7 was created, they had some naming conventions for what's called the compilation. They wanted to continue the story of Final Fantasy 7, and so they said, "We've got this new compilation coming out. We're gonna have a movie called Advent Children. We're gonna have a mobile game called Before Crisis. We're gonna have a PSP prequel called Crisis Core." Notice the naming convention. AC, BC, CC. There was a sequel game called Dirge of Cerberus. Now there's a mobile game called Ever Crisis.
So I saw Advent Children. I watched that one. And
have you seen the complete edition, or have you seen the original edition?
I don't know, a lot of motorcycles.
Yeah, that's all you need to know.
And then they made the other game. What is it? Spirits Within.
Oh, that's not. Yeah, that
I remember
bankrupted
us
Square
being
almost.
Yeah, we're so excited to go see that. My friends and I all got together and went and saw that in theaters, and we were like the graphics, the hair.
Yeah.
But then we were also like,
I took a date.
What was it? Stop it.
It was
the date
last
into Final Fantasy?
No. I was 15 years old, 16 years old. And I was like,
Stop it. You did not.
I did. First and last.
Date?
First and last.
You went on a first date and you were like, this is going to be great. And you're into it the whole time.
I mean, we had been friends. So my personality was known.
You said, now I want to take you on this date and reveal my true self.
My true self. And then I morphed. That dog don't hunt.
No, I'm seeing whether. Did you go to dinner afterwards and try and talk to?
We tried to process. It didn't.
So you're unrefined. What you do now, you tried to do with a date at 15.
Yeah, with no knowledge and no experience, and just I like Final Fantasy. Ming Na is a great actress. Alec Baldwin is in that movie. Also, Roz from Frasier is a voice actor in that movie.
I'm pretty sure there's a meme of someone just explaining something to somebody who's not caring about it. That would be appropriate.
Literally every moment of my life, trying to explain things to people that don't care about it. And then I think Sephiroth did.
You're so lucky you grew up in the age of the internet. We both are.
You're
really taking advantage of it.
My people.
Okay, everybody, we are in our final segment of the episode, which, as always, is our gains before games segment. That's our gains before games, which is an activity that Prof does with his class to help them process things that they gain in their lives in 4 domains. We have physical, emotional, spiritual, and social. And so it helps us to process what we're doing and make it actionable. So it's always going to kind of end up most of the time in a challenge. Always going to end up most of the time is a very strong statement that I just made there.
That really is. I mean, that's a lofty goal.
So for the emotional domain here, how do you typically encourage and describe that for people as they kind of process and get their gains before their games?
Yeah, so we're emotional creatures, and everything that we do results from some of the things that are going on inside. Exterior oftentimes reflects interior. And so what we're always trying to do is to do a pulse check of how are my emotions and stuff. There are 4 pillars of emotional intelligence that would include self-awareness, self-regulation, empathy, and social skills. And so the question for us is, how am I operating in the world? Which bucket of emotionality am I operating out of? Side note, last night I watched Inside Out.
Okay.
And I think in terms of emotional intelligence and thinking about our emotional health, it's the question of who's been driving lately, who's been at the control panel. So is it sadness? Is it joy? Is it anger? Disgust? Any of these things? We just try to process that a little bit and then set some self-regulation goals for ourselves. And that does begin with self-awareness. Who's at the helm and who do I want to be at the helm?
Yeah. Well, based on our conversation in this episode, I was thinking about the experiences that I had when I was playing a game, and it made me think about some things that were deeper outside. It was the dealing with the kind of the topic of addiction in the game, and it did it in a really creative way. And it made me think about, the families that go through addiction and what like addiction looks like in our own lives and what those tendencies can be. But I just had this moment where all I did was kind of think about it, and then it just kind of was. And so I had this moment of clarity, or like this lens that I was like looking through, that it kind of unlocked a way to think about things in a different way because I had just experienced it. But I don't have a tendency to document or make those things more permanent. Like I just kind of like to sit and ponder. And I think I'm trying this year to daydream a little less and like daydream in a way that inspires me to make things more permanent. It gets all jumbled up in my brain. So I think I think that was it moved me, that moment that I had. And so I think my challenge in the emotional domain, based on kind of what we talked about this episode, is to just try and make those things live somewhere, not just in my own brain. So writing some things down, even if they're just unfounded thoughts. I don't like to let things out until I really have it kind of figured out. And as a verbal processor, that makes that a little tricky. So
yeah.
What about you?
That's fair. Yeah, so I've been playing Lies of P lately, and that is a brutally difficult and gruesome game at times, but you're playing as Pinocchio. And there's a moment in the game where you get this substance or aura called ergo, okay? But essentially it's your humanity and how much of a human you are versus how much of a puppet you are. And it really gets me thinking. I began as like this killing sort of machine going around, and I'm like just a puppet of Geppetto's, right? But you begin to gain agency, autonomy, and all this kind of stuff. And it makes me wonder how much of my life I'm just kind of going on rails as a puppet of the systems in which I live versus the humanity of emotion. How am I getting in touch with that humanity? You didn't expect that turn, did you? I mean, it was a left turn there, baby. Wow. But you know what I'm saying? Like,
I know exactly what you're saying.
It really did hit me of like, am I going through the motions? And there's a sense of responsibility. So thinking back to that Inside Out sort of thing, responsibility's at the helm. And that's like an emotion that I've got, a loyalty, duty sort of thing. But where is joy? Where is relationality in all of that? I don't want to go through. I don't want to go through life like a level. I want to live it. So. Some banger quotes today.
Thanks for sharing that. Listener, for you then, in that emotional domain, what do you want that to look like for you this week? What have you experienced recently, and what are you walking into that it would what's a good challenge for you that you'd be well served by thinking about some of these things in that emotional domain? Maybe it's just jotting some things down like me. Maybe it's questioning the entire system, and if our life and divisive responsibilities have put our lives on rails, and if we're experiencing the humanity that we want or could experience, and maybe that the systems that exist in our lives and the things that are pulling us down are holding us back from what it truly means to be human, like Wade. Or you can write some things down like me. So we had a great time. Thanks. Good luck to you, and enjoy your hopeful new emotional availability to yourself and others. All right, everyone, thanks for tuning in. Join us next time when we find out who killed Wade's childhood in the start of our true crime series, and we finish up our series on character creators. Big thanks to Sing4D Laughter for the use of the music. It's awesome. We appreciate it. Check out their stuff on YouTube. And thanks again to Nick Smith, who designed our graphics. We hope that you have enjoyed the show, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Bye, everybody. Have a fantastic time.